Point 1. In American schools, the teacher is the one who stays in the same room all day, whereas the students are the ones who move from classroom to classroom for each lesson. This can create some difficulties in socializing and making friends because for every lesson, you're in a different classroom with a different group of people. So you don't see the same people all day long. And if you don't see them all day long, then it may be hard to establish first contact, as to say. So, if you find yourself in American school, you may have a challenge making friends at first. Point 2. Not a lot of people in America can speak Japanese. Maybe if you find yourself in Hawaii and some parts of California, maybe you can find people who can speak Japanese. But generally, I would say probably 99% of the American population can't speak Japanese. So obviously, if you go to a school in the United States, you are not going to find a lot of companions that you can speak in your native tongue. So this is why in an American school, learning English is very important. That way you can talk to everybody. But I have been told of an interesting situation, like if you go to the US, maybe on an exchange, and lo and behold, there is a fellow Japanese exchange student. You may be tempted to just want to spend all your time with them. And if you're spending all your time with them, then not only are you just going to speak Japanese the entire time and not really learn English, but you're pretty much going to segregate yourself from the American students. So that's definitely one thing you want to think about if you find yourself at an American school with a fellow Japanese student. Point 3, class size. In the United States, class size is often less than what you may find in Japan. I don't have an official statistic, but I would say a good guess of an average class size would be about 20. In fact, class size can actually be lower than that. For example, in my hometown, teachers actually will get upset if there are more than 15 students in the classroom. So wow, 15 students, that's about half of what you may find in Japan. Having fewer students in the classroom can actually be beneficial, especially for the teacher. Having fewer students means that you can involve the students more in your lessons. Also, having fewer students means that as a teacher, you can evaluate your students more effectively. I mean, if you have a large number of students, it would be hard to evaluate their performance, but if you have fewer students, it can be a lot easier. Point 4, the role of a teacher. In the United States, a teacher is a teacher, and your parents are your parents. In the classroom, there is, you can say, a certain level of tolerance that a teacher has when it comes to troublesome students. However, if that tolerance level is exceeded, ultimately what will happen is the teacher will just simply remove the student. Different ways in which student discipline is handled in the United States would include detention. Detention is when a student has to stay after school for maybe an hour or so. And what they do is they just sit in the classroom and do nothing. That may sound ineffective, but it's looked at more on a psychological basis, because if you go home and tell your parents, Mom, Dad, I got detention, your mom and dad are not going to be happy because they know you got detention because you were misbehaving. Another method of discipline in U.S. schools is suspension. Suspension is when a student is not allowed to come to school for a certain number of days. The number of days depends on school for school. For example, my middle school, a student would get suspended for maybe 3 days. I've heard at other schools, students can get suspended for up to 10 whole days. Now, you're not allowed to come to school. That may sound like maybe a short vacation period for the student, but what happens is during the time they're not at school, they're going to obviously get behind in their studies. So when they return to school after the suspension, they're going to find themselves behind their pupils. One of the most, I would say probably the most extreme case of discipline in the United States is expulsion. That is when you are forbidden to come to school for the remainder of the school year. Usually expulsion is the result of a student maybe getting into a lot of fights at school, bringing a dangerous object like a knife or a gun to school, and stuff like that. So it's like in the United States, teachers don't really have to put up with troublesome students. If they are tired of messing with a troublesome student, they can just simply remove them from the classroom. Point 5, teaching techniques. In the United States, teachers like to engage their students a lot in lessons. Teachers feel that if they are engaging their students in the lessons, the students will definitely learn more, and it's also a good way for the teacher to evaluate if the students are learning the lesson content. Another thing is that in the United States, teachers do like it if the students ask questions. So in a lesson in a U.S. school, you'll always see students raising their hands, wanting to ask questions. Teachers like it when their students ask questions because it shows not only that the students are interested in the lesson, but they are also, you can say, brainstorming, processing all the information, interpreting all the information. Also, in the United States, making mistakes is okay. One should never be afraid of making a mistake. So if you raise your hand to answer a question and you answer it incorrectly, don't worry about it. In America, we have a saying, the best way to learn is by making mistakes.